All right, there we go. There we go. All right, welcome to Skip the Tutorial, number one video game podcast in the minds of the intelligentsia. I'm one of your hosts this week, Bryant, uh, Death Destroyer of Worlds, Daniels. And joining me across the universe on Skype is none other than Todd Einstein Fortner. What's going on, man?
It's been so long. I appreciate the wonderful introduction as Einstein, my friend.
Man, of
We are here to
course.
talk about Oppenheimer, though. We are here to talk that. That is why the name is relevant. It's been
Yeah.
a long time since we got a chance to just have some fun and connect on the good old podcast. But when you hit me up and said, "Okay, I'm going to see Oppenheimer," you get out of Oppenheimer. What was the first text? Let's see. You said,
I think I
"Hold
said
up,
I
wait,
need a
wait."
minute.
Yeah,
And
you
I
started
did.
out saying you need a minute, and then it was, but that may be the most singular important film of the 21st century.
That's yes. And a little over 24 hours later, I still feel the same way. I still feel the same way. I mean that hasn't changed. I'm seeing a lot of reviews on it, and I wanted to talk some Oppenheimer because of just how important I think this movie actually is. I mean, every now and then, me and you have talked a lot over time about how pop culture changes culture and how movies can influence the world. And this is one of those movies that I think we listen now or we don't ever listen in the future. And I think that's Nolan's message to the world is it's very much the way I described it is, and I've got to pull my notes up here, Todd, because it's too important for me to get the message of the movie correct and not just go off of a whim. So I said an absolute master class in filmmaking. Oppenheimer is a true indictment of the modern age of manipulation and the idea of government endorsed violence. And that's what it is. It is a true master class in an indictment on modern manipulation. And it's not, the beautiful thing about it too is Nolan is so subtle with his jabs. He's very much one of these guys who I imagine having a debate with him was probably not a fun experience because he will listen to you the entire time you talk. And then right at the end he'll ask you the one question that just pulls every little string of your argument apart. And that's what he did with Oppenheimer. That's exactly what he did. And it also preaches against the self-importance of politicians. There's a beautiful moment. So you've got, of course, Cillian Murphy as Oppenheimer himself.
Peaky Blinders.
Yeah, Peaky Blinders. You've got Robert Downey Jr. in the movie as the politician who essentially considered himself important. He has a lot of self-importance of him, of bringing
Mm.
these masterminds of the world together. Lewis Strauss is the politician, and part of the story is being played out. It's his confirmation to join the presidential cabinet by Congress, and there's some controversy in his past dealing with Oppenheimer, and it's also being told in chunks of the past where Oppenheimer came up, being told during Oppenheimer's review by a investigative board to determine if he still maintains his security clearance, and then it's being told on the side of Lewis Strauss, who's being confirmed before Congress, and it all converges together in one epic final hour. In in an hour that is maybe single-handedly the best hour of filmmaking I've ever seen. I mean, it just single-handedly may be the best hour of filmmaking I've ever seen. There's no action in this movie. There's no over the top. And we'll talk about robots later. There ain't no robots in this movie. There there ain't no there's nothing pretty and distracting, and this is a true film. That's what I'm going to say. This is the kind of movie that they're going to study 50 years from now and go, how did they do this? How what was the message? What was the subtext? What was this is one that will revel in being broken down over the years to come. And let me tell you, we need to listen to Nolan right now. We need to listen.
Mm.
I'm hearing about the Pacific Ocean lighting on fire. like being too hot for the world. I'm hearing about Russia and Ukraine, and Nolan's simply saying through the message of Oppenheimer is that if we humble ourselves before the mission that we feel we have in life, if we humble ourselves and get rid of our self-importance, can you imagine what we can do as a society? Could you imagine what we could do as a world that actually comes together for a mission? Because the scientists that build this little town and are responsible for the, as we all know now, the Manhattan Project, they all have their moral qualms and objectives, and they all have their concerns, but every one of them is there to fulfill a mission. And they've cast aside their self-importance, and they cast aside their issues, and they complete the mission, but at the same time they go, yeah, but now that we're done with it, you're not really going to do this, are you? That's kind of the whole, like, cast aside your importance, because what gets in the way is the self-importance of congressional members and people going, well, yeah, but we need to send a message to the world, but why? And that's a big question that gets asked a lot is, but why? What's the point of this? And you realize that some of these actions later on in the film taken by members of Congress and the War Committee, you really sit there, and Lewis Strauss himself, and you ask yourself, but all that ended up being futile anyway. All of that ended up being, pointless. All you did was hurt people through your actions. It's beautiful. I'll put it like this, and my mind's everywhere on this film, but really, the reality is that the film is summarized by one final scene. It is summarized by the final scene, and the final scene, I will not ruin that for anybody until you had to see it. The final scene left me breathless. It left the entire audience speechless, and it left me to the point where I'm hearing people sigh in the audience, and as I'm leaving the theater, I'm trying to hold back tears because of how powerful the moment was. It was just this little quiet moment. There's no epic music. There's no sweeping score. There's no big action sequence. It is a conversation between two men, two real life, previously existing men. And the words they say, which were documented and apparently was true, the words that they say are so powerful that you can't help but be left shook. I mean, just absolutely shaken to the core. That's where I was at the end of Oppenheimer. Like, it is just amazing. It's breathtaking.
I mean, that was the point when I said, okay, I think it would be wise to get your thoughts on it, just with your previous history with just general movie reviews and the type of, entertainment that you generally enjoy. And I hadn't gotten a chance to see it yet, and I've been on the fence of a 3-hour dialogue heavy movie where I'm a Christopher Nolan fan. I mean, a Batman, Christian Bale series, of course, some of my favorite. Inception, I didn't see in the movie theaters, but it's always that, I don't know if I, as much as I want to see it, because I first saw the trailers and I actually went down like a 4-hour YouTube rabbit hole of just revisiting 1945 and that whole era with the actual atomic bomb and Manhattan theory, and reminding myself of even who Oppenheimer was and just that period in time, and Eisenhower, just the history of the country. And then I think when you were telling me about how it made you feel, I think one of my first questions I asked you was, do you think it's relevant to today's like geopolitical environment, and like you said, what's going on in the world with Russia and the Ukraine war, and just kind of the birth of the podcast anyway. And the podcast side, like, I know we're doing the YouTube thing live and everything, and that's cool, but it's just relevance as far as like even on a heavier level than like a Top Gun last year. Like, is it kind of getting obvious that these are like messages in a direction in cinema for America specifically? Like, we need to go not only to send a message to our people, but just to the broader scale world.
Yeah,
like just a good down home propagandized film.
Yeah,
like,
and for me, this was less propaganda than Top Gun for sure. This was more a message to the world of, hey, stop acting like you're the only one. You're not the only people that live here. Everybody lives
Mm.
here. They brought this up in the movie in a great conversation, and it's between Matt Damon and Cillian Murphy. By the way, Matt Damon killed it, slayed it,
See, that's what that was.
slayed
I'm
it.
glad you brought that up because that's who I'm curious to see,
Yeah,
and like his role as a general.
yeah, Matt Damon killed it. But there's a conversation between Matt Damon and Cillian Murphy where Matt Damon and him are talking about little boy and big boy, the bombs. And Cillian Murphy makes the point. He goes, "Yeah, but shouldn't we take this type of weaponry? Shouldn't we take this before the world to let us as a human society decide what we're going to do with it? Because it's so dangerous. It's so destructive." And the very American Matt Damon, what, one world government? No, this is America. Like it's very like it's very straight to the point. And they don't get me wrong, they don't really forgive Oppenheimer for who he is, because he was a womanizer, and he was obsessive compulsive. Like he's a very crazy, strange. He I guess I was reading somewhere on Reddit, somebody said he did some horrible things. I didn't really get into the details, but that wasn't the point of this movie. Somebody had said, "Hey, it's a problem." They whitewashed Oppenheimer and what he did, and I'm just like, well, I don't know if they
Mm.
whitewashed it, because he clearly showed he had an obsession to solve a problem that he wanted to solve, which was creating this such powerful nuclear energy, or this weapon, this atomic weapon, and he wants to solve it and he knows how to do it. But it also shows how he was racked with the emotions behind it, but it never goes into him crying over it. He doesn't give these big, giant, sweeping speeches saying we need to change. It's all very subtle. It's all done through. And talk about a killer performance from Cillian Murphy. If he doesn't get nominated for an Oscar for this, if he doesn't win an Oscar for this for best performance of the year, then they crazy, because he is just he. You spend the entire movie with him.
Okay.
You're never away from him. And then his wife Kitty, played by Emily Blunt, she kills it. Half the time I didn't even recognize her. Like, they had downplayed, because she's a beautiful woman, but they had downplayed her looks, and they had really done some muting on how she looked. And what that allowed for is, you're not seeing Emily Blunt on the screen. You're seeing a very disturbed and distraught woman who is torn between communism and America, and torn between supporting her husband, who she knows is a womanizer and a cheater. You know what I mean? Like, and it becomes a very subtle performance, and it all, even hers, all culminates to this boiling point where she gives probably the best 5-minute performance in the entire movie in one
Mm.
moment, which turns out was entirely true and is based off of transcripts from from the board, where they were trying to determine if he kept his security clearance, and they were asking her questions. And then
Sounds like that was she said moment.
yeah, and then you find out, like, that's when you realize, because you're thinking, why did Oppenheimer marry her? Was it just because he had a kid with her out of wedlock? And then you turn around and find out, oh, he married her because of how intelligent she is. She's brilliant. And I would watch a movie again just based off of. I would watch this movie, but based from her perspective. Like, I would see that 3-hour movie again. Just that's how good this was. This was, I don't know, man. This was one of those once in a lifetime movie events that it kind of reminds me of, like, when The Sixth Sense came out and everybody was going to see it and talking about it, and when The Matrix came out and everybody was going to see it and they were all talking about seeing The Matrix, and Titanic when that came out,
Well,
and
I
everybody,
think we
yeah,
kind of led into that though, just as far as like the timing of it and the relevance to the
yeah.
go back, like and the rarity of it, and how you can be real strategic. And was some of the filming of this done during the vid time?
I think
Like,
so. I think
you know what
so.
I'm saying? Because
Yeah.
that's something that I really couldn't like. Could you tell? Like, did it seem like it was any relevance to it? Because you could see some movies, you could tell that during it was filmed during the vid time, and it was a situation where it affected the actual filming itself. I hadn't heard anything from anybody to give me any indication that had any effect on like the relevance of it, the power of it, I'm still hesitant to spend money right now in an environment where it's getting tighter and tighter for 3 hours worth of movie. But the more I hear it from people that I trust, I mean, primarily like people like you, it's a couple other people that's like, nah, this is actual masterwork. It's a 10 out of
Yeah.
10. It's worth it. It might be worth it just for me as a Robert Downey Jr. fan, just watching his story arc all the way from like shit like Weird Silent Science and Charlie Chaplin back in the day, all the way to playing Tony Stark for the too many years as a decade to actually maybe going back to having a real film with gravitas and you know what I'm saying, like importance, relevance, not outside of like a Marvel universe type of situation. Um, so I don't know. Just the timing of it does feel right, like to come out with a movie like this. Also, maybe to help save the cinema industry, the box office, actually going to the movies industry with these types of movies outside of stuff like what we'll talk about later, like The Flash or something real quick. So, I mean, how heavy is the timing of it in that aspect, you think?
Yeah, man, I think it's right on time. Between that and Barbie, right? Like you got these right two. We didn't end up seeing Barbie like we wanted to last night. We had other things that came up. I still want to see Barbie. I mean, that's the movie looks really good, really funny. Um, but the fact is I think movies go in cycles, and we've been on this cycle since Iron Man really came out, where we're getting more and more. It's studios don't want to take a chance on something that's not original property. Nobody else, by the way, nobody else gets this movie made but Christopher Nolan. Christopher Nolan's the only name that could do. Hey, I want to make a 3 hour biopic about the guy who created the atomic bomb. Really? And I don't want to use any special effects, so I'm going to blow a lot of stuff up, and it's going to cost a lot of money, and I'm going to have a whole lot of liability insurance, and it's going to be real expensive. All right, blank check. Like, for Christopher Nolan, yes. Me,
Tropic Thunder.
yes, 100%. Nobody else makes that movie. Like, think about the insanity. Your blockbuster of the year comes out in July, and your big blockbuster this year is a 3 hour masterclass in filmmaking that is ultimately an indictment on the world and the direction we've gone about the guy who created the atomic bomb. It's insane. It sounds like a comedy bit. It sounds like the beginning, but it's real. And it came at the perfect time because this is not an entertaining movie. I will say that. This is not a big action packed, over the top, entertaining. I've got all these characters. We're fighting stuff. It's not that. This is a talking movie. This is all talk. This is all
Okay.
communication and dialogue.
With that said,
But
as
it's
a
wonderful.
masterpiece, 10 out of 10
10 out of
type of
10.
movie. That's what I hear.
It's an
Any critique?
engrossing
What's the
movie.
critique? Is it tough to get? Where's the 3 hours I'm in?
The 3 hours is tough. My biggest critique was probably right before you hit the last hour. There's about a 25-minute segment that really slows the movie down. It almost feels like it's coming to a dead halt, and I'm sitting there going, where are we going with this? That's what I wanted to know. Where are we going with this? And then when it starts to ramp up, it makes a lot more sense. So my biggest nitpick is about that 25 minutes. If maybe there was a different way to shoot that or a different way to include it, but at the end of the movie, you understood why they did it the way they did, why Nolan did it the way they did. That would be the only critique I would have, and that would be my smallest little nitpicking detail. I know that some people have complained that they feel it's too fast paced. It's you're moving through the stories too fast in the editing. And don't get me wrong, at the very beginning of the movie, you're jumping timelines a lot, and it takes a minute to get used to it. But the beautiful thing about that is Nolan going to studio execs and to audience members. Hey, the modern audience is intelligent enough to understand this. That's what I love about that. I don't need to handhold you. I don't need to do what Marvel does. I don't need to do what Star Wars does and handhold you through what we're going through. I'm just going to let you figure it out on your own. And they do that. And the last time that I remember a movie really doing that well was actually a Star Wars movie. And it was Rogue One. Rogue One did a good job of not hand-holding you through the different planets where you're going. They just kind of let it play out. And that's still been my favorite Star Wars movie of the last, probably, of these last few, if I will. Besides the
Yeah,
Mandalorian
that's
series,
fair.
but
That's
Rogue One.
fair.
Um, but it's this kind of experience that you just don't ever get now. And I think when it comes to timing, Todd, it's more crucial than ever that this movie be successful, because what I'm seeing a lot of is there's studios who are not willing to take a risk on big budget or even mid budget movies that we would have normally seen probably 15, 20 years ago. Some of the best movies ever made, or some of the best movies of
Right.
all time. Me and Bob were actually talking about this the other night, and he asked a really good question. And this reminds me of an interview that Christopher Nolan gave. He said, "Hey, what happened to the mid 2000s comedies? What happened to the Anchormans and the Dodgeballs and the Talladega Nights and what the Step Brothers and just like these really great comedies of the 2000s,
Classic. Yeah.
classic comedies?" And I started looking through the comedies of 2022, 2023, and they don't make them anymore. And then it reminded me, Nolan had an interview the other day where they said, "Christopher Nolan, what's the movies that make you stop and put the remote down and finish that movie on the television?" He goes, "Well, anything by Stanley Kubrick." I understand that. Kubrick's a master filmmaker. I love Stanley Kubrick. And then he says Talladega Nights. And I was like, we one in the same. Talladega Nights on, I'm stopping the movie right there. I got to watch Talladega Nights. It's a
Right. I
classic.
mean, Step Brothers is a classic that we've always gone back to, just
Always.
referencing, the podcast in general and just in general in life. And actually, it was I don't know his name, but the guy's from Workaholics with the short hair. He was
Yeah.
talking about, how comedies like that specifically don't exist anymore. If you even try to do a comedy nowadays like that, you got to mix it. It's got to be like an action comedy,
Yeah.
and it's kind of rotates back to the same reason why it's very difficult to make an Oppenheimer. It's just on a different spectrum. Like either it's gonna be like everything has kind of melded into multiversal
Yeah.
superhero kind of genre, corporate speaky kind of film. Like if you spend because there's an investment, it's a $200 million, $250 million investment. You can't take a chance on just anything nowadays. But like you said, I mean, and we'll talk about it briefly with Transformers, The Flash, like other little stuff that we've seen, where it's still some space for that. But even those movies, those are $200 million movies, right?
They are.
You know, so it is in a space like that where you even have those type of movies costing $200 million. It's hard to make a 40, $50 million movie where you just think it's gonna actually, recoup in this environment, which
Well,
is sad. Like, but then you have movies like Terrifier that come out that they spent like $1,800 on, and
yeah.
it's the most horrifying movie I ever saw, and it's kind of cult
It
classic.
has made so much money. Like it's ridiculous. But I'm telling you, man, I think if they started making movies again, like The Hurt Locker, where you spent,
I think they need to, man. I think they
yeah.
have to.
I mean, I really do. I mean, if you look at 2008, some of the biggest movies of that year were like Frost Nixon. That movie's captivating. That interview between David Frost and Richard Nixon played out in this way, and it's just happy go lucky milk. Like I'm looking at all these Slumdog Millionaire. There will be
That was a
blood.
gangster movie, right?
Yeah, there
Right.
will be blood. So good. Trans Siberian. That's a classic. I mean, all of these movies that they weren't huge movies, but people went and saw them because you hear from people like what studios don't understand, Todd, and I will say this from the beginning, and I've been saying this for a long time. Studios think audiences are just idiots. They think the audience is just a moron. As a
Right.
collective, they
Right.
need to be spoon fed. They need to be given information. They need to be taken through movie. That is not the case. In
Well,
1980s,
aren't they and don't they? Oh, never mind. Go ahead.
I was going to say 19 what 80 whatever. Blade Runner comes out. And Blade Runner is still talked about to this day. It was hated by audiences at the time, and then they released the final cut, and now it's become this cult classic. But all these movies that have come out over time, you talk about some of the biggest ones, they didn't spoon feed people. The ones that are considered classics that people constantly go back to, constantly watch, they're not dumbed down, action packed movies all the time. Even Die Hard. Die Hard is an action movie, yes, but it is not a dumb action movie. It is extremely intelligent. It's very witty. It's a lot of fun. But even then, if you look at Hans, right? Hans Gruber, the main bad, He's even a sentimental villain who you kind of understand, and you get this complicated relationship between John McClane and his wife, and the office, and the cop outside, who's of course Carl Winslow, and he's talking about shooting a kid, and like it's a great movie, man. But it's intelligently
Well,
well
and
done and well paced.
to bring it back though, because a legitimate question with the Oppenheimer, because based on some of the research I've done, haven't had a chance to see it yet, but
Yeah.
trusting your opinion, you being my dog, and kind of we having that synergy. Do you think this offers an opportunity kind of for a bit of a cinematic reset in light of the strikes, whatever was going on with Hollywood there, and just in general, kind of maybe a little bit more of a shift back to, specific to American cinema itself, you know what I'm
Yes.
saying? And being a bit directionless in the past few years of kind of this ambiguous state that it's been in, to where we had eras like 80s was like souped up like horrors and like steroids and shit, like with
Yeah.
Arnold Schwarzenegger and fucking Rambo, and then you got the 90s. You got 95 is kind of Tupac's area, but you get into 99 like we referenced earlier with the Matrix, and you get early 2000s where it's kind of a smorgasbord, and then it seems like over the past 10, 15, 10 years for sure, and then even leading again Viet era, a whole bunch of other stuff. It's just been all over the place of just basically Marvel multiverses, and that's the
Yeah.
only thing we can sell, not only to ourselves but the world. Is Oppenheimer like a area where you think, okay, we gotta, because it's been other movies that's kind of had opportunities kind of reset, but this one is a big like one that could prove a point
Yeah.
internationally to say, okay, we need to start putting out stuff with a message, just definitive, yeah, no question.
No question. I think this is the reset
Uh,
opportunity. I mean, I think what this world misses is the water cooler movie. It's the water cooler television show. We don't really have the water cooler television show anymore. Like people used to get around the water cooler and they talk about, Seinfeld back in the '90s, and then they would talk about Friends, and then you get to the point where they would talk about stuff like The Office, or like, did you see what happened with Jim and Pam on The Office? And like, they don't have those, and those shows are considered classics, I think, in a lot of ways because of the effect they had culturally on bringing people together. And I think that this world kind of misses that, which is having those big must see movies. Like for a long time, the Oscars and these studios have been really out of touch with what people want or what people legitimately want to see, and they're not bringing in people at the same time. A lot of people are staying at home. This is a 10:55 showing on a Saturday morning, Todd, for a 3-hour biopic, and it was sold out.
right.
10:55 on a Saturday, 3-hour biopic about the guy who created the atomic bomb, and it was sold out. Like, tell me that's not a cultural moment and a shift to go, hey, maybe people are actually intelligent enough to understand some of this stuff, like we used to know they were in the '90s and
Like, did you
2000s.
leave there? Did you leave there with the idea where all these jokes about nuclear bombs and shit going off and playing around with it right now, like how incredibly ignorant and retarded that would be, or it's stupid,
Yes.
since I can't say retarded anymore.
Yeah,
I'll say
to answer your question, how
the
ignorant
retard. Okay.
to how ignorant that all would be is it's not understanding, and understanding that these things that people joke about and talk, like, it has real consequence in the world. We've been disconnected so long, and we live in a memeified society that's run by Reddit and Facebook and the internet and all that stuff, and people are like, oh, dark humor saved me, dark humor saved me. Yes, dark humor has a point, don't get me wrong, but at the end of the day, there is still real concern that these things have real consequences, and there are real things that occur for them. After they spend a brief moment in Oppenheimer talking about the death count, in Japan after they dropped the bombs. And he goes, well, they thought they'd be okay, but over the next few days, an additional 50,000 people died because of the effects of the bomb. And then I'm flashing back to Grave of the Fireflies, which is such a classic anime movie. But I'm flashing back to the Grave of the Fireflies and remembering this story about these two children who survived the first blast, but ended up both dying because of the sickness afterward. You know what I mean? Like, And then it's remembering that this stuff is heavy and it's real and it's real life. We need our entertainment and we need our moments of levity to break free and to decompress. But it's still situationally, we need to be reminded of the weight of life, is what I will say.
Right.
We need to be
Right.
reminded of the weight of it.
So good, informative entertainment
Yes.
for functioning or attempting to function democracy.
Yes.
Like maybe you can get the information out in this way. That's a good way to disseminate information in this
Today it
world of
is.
ours, I think.
Yeah.
Right.
When I
Right.
told Bob it was a 3 hour movie, he's like, "Good Lord!" He's like, "I hope they put like Subway surfers in the corner so people could pay attention."
They do have titties in the movie though, right? Like it is
They do.
like
They
it's
do.
okay. So you got that. You got to give at least put titties in the movie or some sort if it's gonna be
Yes.
3 hours. If I got to sit through it,
Yeah.
3 hours. I don't give a damn if I mean and bombs. So you don't
Yeah.
have to have a lot of titties. You don't have to have a lot of bombs. You don't have to have titties or bombs. I mean both of them, but you have to have one or the other. So as long as they have that, yeah, I gotta support it. I guess.
Well, and it's also got very between the writing and direction of Nolan. The thing I'll say is that there's subtlety to every character. There's a subtlety. They're real people, and you're watching real people deal with real ramifications of the things that they've done, but at the same time, not in an overdone, I'm going for an Oscar speech sort of way, like the King's Speech or what. I never saw that movie, so I don't even know what it's about. But you know what I mean. It's
So
not.
it's not as good as House of the Dragon, is what you're telling me. It's not as good as House of the Dragon.
There you go.
So
There you go.
that's what you're saying.
Adam H is in the chat. He says, "What's up, guys?" He says, "I want to see this movie in IMAX, and even weeks out, the morning showing is pretty much sold out. The Mall of Georgia
See,
is the only
great.
IMAX near me playing the 70 millimeter version."
That's great. That's great to hear. Actually,
Yes,
that's great
it
to
is.
hear. Right? That is great to hear. So okay, now I'm forced to go see it.
Yeah,
It'll be next week most likely. Yeah, and then we might revisit our conversation. Will definitely revisit the personal conversation on it for sure.
yeah. I
What I
can't
mean,
wait
what
to hear
else?
your thoughts on it for sure. Like it was so. It's a revelatory movie, and it for me it screams, "Hey, guys, we don't want another Beetlejuice." Even though I kind of do, but in reality, it's like I'm gonna watch that at home
Are you
on
sure
the TV.
you may want another Beetlejuice after you see the Flash? Knowing you,
Maybe, yeah, yeah.
you may want another Beetle, just one more if they don't fuck it up. You might want another Beetlejuice if yeah, once you watch the Flash.
But what I really want is I want this to result in more original, interesting filmmaking stories that aren't just Godzilla, Marvel, Star Wars. And I love all those things for what they are, but even I got burned out to the point where I'm like, I'm just going to wait for it to come on the TV. Like,
Right.
I'll wait because it'll be here in a month, and I don't really care about seeing it in theaters. Oppenheimer's the first one that got my butt up out of the seat and said, I need to go see this in theaters. For opening weekend. Opening weekend, I need to go see this in theaters. First movie that's done that, and I'm just like, that's what I want from the movies. I want if I'm going to see a story, I don't want to see a story that I already know how it's going to play out. Even though
Well, I mean,
Oppenheimer's a biopic,
Oppenheimer.
you kind of
Yeah, I
do.
mean, we
Yeah,
knew
we
that they were
knew.
gonna drop the bomb.
Yeah,
Hiroshima.
but it's at least interesting to that point. But I want to see movies that have some thought behind them. That's generally. Eric B says, "Hey, if you don't mind, can you talk about the bomb explosion? I'm curious about the special effects. Is it just an artsy type of explosion visuals, or is there an actual blast? Wondering because there's no CGI talk. Oh, it's an
Right.
actual
Great
blast.
question. Great
It's
question.
it is an actual blast, and it is a moment in the film that sticks with me in a way. It's imprinted on my mind because through the use of Nolan's subtlety, you completely understood the power of what they were looking at. You understood what that was, and it is probably I would say leading up to the blast, post blast, it is probably a good 15-minute sequence in the movie itself, and it takes its time and it respects. That is Nolan respecting the power of it, going, this is what power is. This is the true power of what they had in their hands. And you're watching it and you're looking at it and it is captivating, it's amazing, and it's just all engrossing. It's one of the best things I've ever seen visually.
To take the
Visually.
opposite side of the question too, is something else that I saw. What about the visual effects? And because from what I understand, it's like a quantum realm or the particle realm, and they use practical effects on both sides, on the explosion side and on that side. Like, what about those scenes to you? They have like the same type of effect, or is it at a totally different
I would
type of situation? Like when they went to color scenes of black and white.
Yeah, so the quantum elements that you're looking at are really more of when you're inside of Oppenheimer's mind and you're kind of seeing how he sees the world and what he's piecing together. And pretty early on, there's about a 3.5, 4 minute sequence of him thinking about quantum mechanics and quantum physics, and they go into this quote unquote realm. It's very mesmerizing. It's not as
Okay.
powerful or captivating, but it did make me go, how'd they do that? Like, how they, how did they do that? Like, I was thinking about it as like how they do that, but
So it was some movie magic on
yeah,
that side, but it's more of a like the practical explosions.
yeah, the practical
Was
explosion
more
was gorgeous. Like it was breathtaking, and I will say, no, I'm not going to talk about that because I want people to see it because the way they show the explosion for me, the way the explosion worked out was it reminded me a lot of some of the stuff he did in Interstellar with music and no music and the way like that's where a lot of people thinks that Nolan's power lies within the writing or the direction and stuff like that. What really in my mind where Nolan's power rises is in the editing process and the music selection and the choices of the use of music or no use of music. Like it's letting some of those moments play out. Because I just recently rewatched Interstellar. I guess to sort of get ready for Oppenheimer. I was like, I just love Interstellar. I love that movie, and I can't believe it's like almost 10 years old, or it is 10 years old. And Interstellar for me is still one of the best sci-fi movies of the modern age. And there's a moment at a point where in Interstellar where the music completely cuts out and the moment is that much more powerful because of it.
hold on, wait. So I got Adam wrote. So I just went online to look at tickets for Oppenheimer and IMAX, and it put me in a 4 minute queue due to high volume traffic. Eric B, of course. Yeah, that's what we're here for. But yeah,
I love
okay.
it.
So
I love it.
that's great to hear, though. That is great to hear. That's great to hear. Just as a yeah, just as an overall fan of just the movie industry and kind of missing that feeling of being able to go and find a good movie where it's not just like I love and there's nobody that loves like superhero comic booky cheesy shit than me. And you
Yeah.
know that. Like I'll pretty much settle for damn near any of that slop that you feed me because it's just delicious. You know what I'm saying? But it's even for me, I'm extremely excited about going to see Oppenheimer, just the actors in it, and just we talk about it. I can watch just history and military stories on the History Channel all day. I went down a rabbit hole just studying Oppenheimer and the history and how interesting
Mm-hmm.
and the choices that were made and the reasons why and just the dichotomy of thought of okay, Japan isn't going to surrender, and is it really also just about saving American lives, or is it also about just the fact that this is kind of unstoppable situation as far as history is like we gotta have the bomb, the power, because if we don't get it, the Nazis may get it. Russia is gonna get it, but it's funny how I don't feel like it's a spoiler in the movie. It's the history side of it. Russia was gonna get it anyway because we
Yeah.
created it. They stole it from us. So I just look forward to seeing them package that with the Christopher Nolan. I can imagine Batman is somewhere pulling the strings in the movie somewhere secretly, and it's actually action in the background while I listen to the great dialogue. But the fact that he was able to I still can't get my head around the fact that he was even able to put this out. And if it makes the money I think it's gonna make, yes,
We're gonna see a
winner chicken dinner.
revolution. I think we're gonna see a turning point in modern the theaters again because I think it's it's like the idea of, I put it like this, it's like the idea of eating too much sugar, right? Like I could wake up in the day and be like, man, I'm really craving some sugar, and just like I'm gonna go get donuts for breakfast, and then for lunch I'm gonna have, ice cream, and for dinner I'm gonna have birthday cake and whatever. And it's like I'm just really craving sugar. And that's kind of what comic books, Star Wars, Marvel movies are. It's kind of sugar for the brain. It's enjoyable sometimes, and you need it sometimes. Sugar, you can't live. You technically do need sugar. Not all this processed stuff, but it's part of foods. Most of the time, you want to get it from apples or whatever. But if you eat too much of it, right, you're gonna get a stomach ache, and eventually your teeth are gonna fall out, and your brain. When they say sugar rots your brain, I really do think that. Like, I think sugar has chemical reactions in the brain. Like, you can't have it all the time. Like,
It's akin to the book of sugar, baby. We ain't got to talk about that
yeah,
right
yeah,
now.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Sonic would. Sonic would.
Sonic.
Sonic would.
Yes.
Oh,
Yeah.
Adam says
Gotta go
Interstellar.
fast.
Adam says Interstellar is by far my favorite Nolan film. I'm with you. Like, Interstellar ranks up there for me. I just rewatched it after seeing it in theaters, and it's still probably one of the most captivating movies, sci-fi movies ever made. I think it's
Great
up there with
movie.
2001:
Killian was
Space
talking
Odyssey.
about it in the interview, but see that goes to my point. I'm Nolan for me probably is still The Dark Knight because I need that sugar. But
I love The Dark Knight,
but no,
but The Dark Knight's
right, right,
The Dark Knight's like getting sugar from an apple.
exactly.
That's what that's
Great
like.
example.
Yeah.
Exactly. Some like actual real fruit, like a real blueberry of some sort, not just drinking a goddamn Kool-Aid
Yeah.
poured up with nothing but sugar, just diabetes inducing.
I need to
Diabetes.
rewatch.
But
I need to watch Tenet. By the way, I still haven't seen Tenet. I need to watch
I
that
still haven't
movie.
seen Tenet either. See, that's another one. That's what. So that's I'm not gonna sit here and be like I've even seen every Christopher Nolan movie, but Oppenheimer, I definitely. I don't know. I just feel like it's gonna have that butterfly rippling effect.
It
Moving
is.
forward, hopefully, man, we can put. I mean, for us to be on here talking about this, for you to come out of retirement for, uh,
Come out of retirement. I'm 37. We coming back to, like, we're getting back in a groove here. Like
right,
it's
right, me too, right.
I'm here. Oh, Adam says, so
Barrett,
if I
Barrett
do
Bonds and Mark
the
McGuire.
I do IMAX, the only seats available for any day I've looked are at the very front row. I would not watch this movie on the very front row, Adam. I'm just gonna be real with you. But yeah, but we wanted to talk about Oppenheimer. We got a couple other things we want to talk about. Todd, I'm gonna kick it over to you to talk a little bit about a little DC movie called The Flash. A little
Oh
curious
yeah,
about
yeah,
that.
yeah. I want to thank you for that. Cause the bootleggery. Just to get that out the way. The pirateness of it actually helps. So I'm gonna preface it with that. But nah, I mean it's been out for a while. It's been out for about a month. Um, and for me, it's not it's the exact opposite of what Oppenheimer represents. It's the exact ending of kind of different kind of sugar rush for the DCEU or whatever universe, the Snyderverse,
Yeah,
the days long gone of Man of Steel. This is like the end of that with Ezra Miller, who is just a controversial person that I really just cannot stand, like, because I'm a normal person to a degree. And most people can't stand just because he's going around here throwing, speaking of fruits, I don't know what the hell he was throwing at some lady, knocking her out, just being exceptionally weird, and apparently on a lot of drugs that I don't really jive with because it causes you to fuck with other people.
yeah,
With all that said,
yeah.
I watched it. I watched it like 1.5 times because I had to stop it. I had to wait for the significant other to come through because I wanted to watch it together.
I've done
I
that a
got a
couple
decent
times.
setup
Yeah,
with it, right? Because I had low expectations going into it. I think if you have reasonable to low expectations going in, you understand that you are not getting apple sugar, as you would say. You are definitely closer to like booger sugar, like or
Pixie sticks,
just
Pixie
pussy
sticks
stick
right
sugar. You
down
know
the
what I'm
throat.
saying?
Yeah,
Right. It actually was surprisingly really good as far as Ezra Miller's acting in it. There was some emotional connections between him and his mother that surprisingly played out very well as far as just an actor is concerned. I mean, I'm an 80s baby, so Michael Keaton nostalgia was there for his Batman 1989. You can't go wrong with the soundtrack. You can't go wrong with the introduction of that. You can't go wrong with the Batmobile.
wait, did they
Um,
did they did they use the score or did they put in the
they used the
prints?
man, you got to see it.
Okay,
So
I'm
you
gonna
can
see
check
it.
it
I'm
out.
gonna see
But
it. I'm
yeah,
gonna see it.
like
I'm gonna
as
see
soon
it.
as they play the score, you get
That
excited. But
1989 soundtrack by Prince is still one of my favorite soundtracks of all time.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
There's no. I'll get that out the way. Don't get your hopes that high. They didn't have
yeah,
that
yeah.
kind of money. But
Yeah, they need a
it's
lot of
still
money for that.
right. But it's still Batman. It's still Batman in there,
Yeah,
and he kind of buoyed the film a little bit to me because the one problem too, why I'm concerned about Oppenheimer with the Flash, it's like a 2.5 hour movie. You feel me? So like it is a long movie. I did feel that it was long at a certain point, but I could see how in probably some time it could potentially have like cult classicness to it too.
fair.
There's gonna be a group of people that connect with this movie unexpectedly when it actually just fully comes out on video and people get a chance to watch it. That I think will be fine. I mean, there's an introductory weird scene with some babies where a lot of people will talk about like if you have a problem with the cringiness of the CGI in this movie in the first 10 minutes, you probably won't like the movie because there'll be other aspects where just the CGI will be off-putting to you. If you can get over that, then you'll really like the movie.
Yeah,
It really almost simply boils down to it like that as far as comic book fan, movie, you know, person, and that's what I watch. That's a big key to it because there's some really excellent CGI aspects to it, like with the speed verse is kind of okay. But when he goes into this little weird dome and it shows like him going back in time, that those are like the eye-poppingly scarring like CGI moments where people will get upset and others won't give a fuck. Like me, I tended to not give a damn. It was just certain introductions to in the story that slowed down, and for me, that had to be when they introduced Superwoman. Not because I have like some old misogynistic problem with Superman and Superwoman. I don't really care. I'm more of a Marvel fan anyway. I think she was excellent, even though I don't know her name. I believe she's a Hispanic lady. She seemed really cool, but it could have done with or without her. Um, General Zod, I forget his name too, but he's a great actor. I think they could have used him a little bit more during those scenes. The fact that they didn't focus on him, it kind of threw the whole movie off a little bit at that point, going into the last act, which to me really threw a lot of stuff off too, because it's a time traveling multiversal yet again that's been done with
Michael Shannon.
Loki,
Michael
Spider-Man,
Shannon.
Michael Shannon.
I had to
Thank you,
think of his name.
Zod.
He's one
This
of
is
my
why
favorite
now
actors.
brother, if
Yeah,
they would have used Michael Shannon more,
yeah,
like they just used him as a fucking plot point, they might as well put a Muppet Baby in that same part there and just had them blowing the fuck up. But you got Michael Shannon who has gravitas as a real actor. He's
yeah.
probably one of the only ones that you have outside of Ezra carrying it, even though he was kind of annoying because there's two Ezras in there. But I cannot take away from like his acting skill. Um, but yeah, like the fact that they didn't use General Zod enough, they didn't use Henry Cavill. I don't know what kind of weird political stuff was going on with that. It was some weird CGI stuff. The third act almost can ruin the whole movie for like period. It could take a good movie and shit on it, but with between the nostalgia, some of the cameos, there is a weird. I gotta just get this out the way. George Clooney is in here. Fuck it, I'm spoiling it.
Yeah, I heard about
All
that.
right.
I heard about that.
Yeah, that's out there.
Yeah,
All
I
right,
heard
that's
about.
out there.
He's
It's
not
been
my
out for a
favorite
month.
Batman, but he's
This
yeah,
isn't Oppenheimer, right? And what happened in those movies wasn't his fault. I don't think like nipple suit
nah,
Batman.
nah.
You know what I mean?
That
But it
was
was
the
just
Shoemaker thing. It was
it undid what they did at the end of me undoes the whole point of the whole movie. So I was like I wrote it out. I was with it the whole time, and at the end I was like, well, what the fucking point was of the whole movie in general. But if they get rid of Ezra Miller, I think it's a good swan song. I don't think it's a wasted movie. In the DCEU universe, I honestly would say it's probably my second favorite movie behind Suicide Squad.
I'm going to watch it this week, and next week I want to talk about it some because I still haven't seen it. I still got to watch it. I still got to
Right,
watch it.
right.
Like it's one of those movies that like it's interested me since the beginning, and like Adam points out how even Ezra's personal issues aside, I really don't. I don't like what he's done at all. I'm not gonna. But look, man, I grew up a fan of '70s rock and roll, and if you grew up a fan of '70s rock and roll, you had to learn to separate art from artist. It just is what it is. I mean, he's horrible. He's a horrible human being.
Yeah, but he did no, but he did do
But I
he
heard he
did
did
do
a
a
good
really good
job.
like He
He's a
did a
good
good job,
actor.
and he
He's a
no,
good
and he was
actor.
a good Flash, and I had a lot of fun with the movie too. I'll watch it again. Like seriously, it was some moments in the movie that give you the feels, and I mean
Yeah.
the emotional connection. I'm telling you, surprising. Like as far as acting skills, those scenes with his mother actually were like, wow, okay, that's he's a he you could see why they were trying to save the film with them.
Now,
You
my
know what I'm
question to
saying?
you, Todd, is so the DC universe or whatever we're doing, like it's had a rocky start since Batman versus Superman.
Damn it.
It has had a rocky start since BVS, right? Do you think that bringing on what's his name to run the whole thing, the guy behind Suicide Squad and Guardians of the
James
Galaxy,
Gunn.
James Gunn? Do you think bringing James Gunn on? Do you think that this is the direction they need to go, and he's going to be the answer to save the DC universe? Because I like
I'll say
James
this.
Gunn movies personally. I do.
Me too. Me too. Guardians of the Galaxy 3 was great. Yeah. But
I've
yeah,
been on
no,
him since
that's
Tromeo and Juliet back in the day. So yeah,
right.
like James Gunn, I
Right.
like.
Like you're a real James Gunn fan. But I'm saying for that specific question, okay, to tie it back to the Flash, I think it was a good decision for him to keep the Flash because you know they were going to try to can it due to all the drama. I think it was a good executive decision to put this movie out because it was a fun, good movie, and it's in a line where I could see James Gunn taking DC EU. I also think he stamped Beetlejuice, not Beetlejuice.
I'll be right
Uh,
back.
what's it?
I'll be right back.
Okay,
Hold on.
you all right? Yeah, it's an emergency. Okay, well, yeah, I guess some there's probably something wrong with the dog, man. But see, you can hear him in the background. But go. This gives me a point to go back with you, Adam. As far as your biggest beef with the whole General Zod thing is kind of played out. That's real, and I meant like even that finishing scene of the whole movie was kind of played out. I just think they could have used him as far as some dialogue in the movie at some point, not just keep going back to him as far as like making him a focal
Um.
point in the movie.
Yeah. So.
You
Uh.
all right, man? You got
Yeah.
some
My
spy shit
wife.
going on?
No, my wife was out in the backyard sunning, getting sun, and I accidentally locked her out.
That's funny. I
Yeah.
did that to my grandfather, the military vet, when I was 5. He almost killed me. So I'm imagining you about dead. So yeah, now the Flash, I would definitely say like not inside the movies, just to go, quickly because we just wanted to touch on it real quick. I didn't want to spend an hour
Yeah.
talking about the Flash, but it's definitely something worth a watch. A nice action packed time, you know. Whether it be really, I would almost say you could wait for it to come out on a good streaming service like HBO
Yeah.
Max or some stuff, and then you like must see at that point. If you really just are a fan, you can purchase it. But I was glad to be able to see it for the free. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I, yeah,
No, I'm ready to see it, and I want to talk a little bit more about the Flash because it's to me is like it was the one that I was most interested in. You know,
like I said,
like I
it's the
really
second
was.
outside of Suicide Squad. Outside of Suicide Squad, um, and it might even be more than that one. It might. I just personally like Suicide Squad more than most. It might even be better than that one. It might take number one if I watch it again. Um,
That's a good question. Did you see Adam's question in the chat? He said, "So with DC coming out and saying they have no plans on recasting Ezra as the Flash, do you think there's any way Ezra can have some type of redemption arc and revive his career?"
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
If Robert Downey Jr. could,
yeah,
of course he can, and he's a good actor, and I think he's a good Flash. He just got to keep his head down. See, yes, yeah, I agree. I agree. Robert Downey Jr. But
I mean, I think that
yeah,
if people forgive, like, I mean, people forgive over time. Like Mel Gibson got forgiven, and he's back a little bit.
we love redemption
We
stories, bro.
do, we
I'm
do.
a redemption story. We love redemption stories. I just don't know if that motherfucker will do it. Like he seems like a really horrible person. That's kind of weird and does strange shit.
He's like,
But I'm rooting for him because he's a good Flash.
he's like, I just want to drink the blood of baby goats. And nah, I'm kidding. I don't know. That's not an accusation. I'm just saying, like, he's just kind of a strange dude. But yeah, I think he could probably have a redemption arc. Like, I mean, Hollywood loves that. The general audiences love it. People love to see people come back and be like, oh, they're good people again. Like, I mean, that's just the real. That's how we are as humans. We love a good redemption story. Um, now I'm gonna watch it this week, and we're gonna talk about it next week. I'm
If I
curious.
could put a rating on it, I would give it a 6.7.
Fair. That's fair.
Tripping up to 7.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
fair.
Good movie, fun. I'll watch it multiple times. Now, with that out the way, real
Yes.
quick, because this is something we both got a chance to see, but I want to
Yes.
hear your quick perspective because you also hit me up on this. Like, keeping in mind that somebody that I trust hated the movie, but what are your thoughts on the Transformers: Rise of the Beast? I know that'll be out soon
I
too
I
on
loved it.
out of the
I loved it. I did like. I'm just gonna be straight up. Like maybe I went in with no expectations. Maybe that's it. Like zero expectations. And this is coming from somebody who does not like the Michael Bay Transformers movies at all. I haven't liked any of them I've seen. I thought the first one, even though the first one's got like a 7 on IMDb, even the first one with Shia LaBeouf, I was like, it's 2.5 hours. It was boring. Like I just found it boring. Like I didn't. The action was overdone. And this one for me was the movies that probably should have started the series. Like this is the way
right,
you do it. You're back in the 90s. It's 1994. You've got a limited set of Transformers characters. There's not 100 of them. Just filling their screen up. The action is clear cut. The direction of the movie's fun. The writing's fun. The human actors are actually interesting. I actually care about what's going on with them because to me they were actually interesting people, but they're limited. They keep them down to two main actors for the human side of the story, three if you count the little brother. But you know, overall, and it's engaging, it's funny, it's entertaining, it's fast paced, it's got great action sequences. It's got my favorite Transformer of all time, Unicron. I mean, who doesn't love Unicron? He's a planet. He's a transform. He's Galactus in the Transformer world, but he's a planet. It's cool. Um, Everything about it is what I wanted from a Transformers movie when they first started making them. Like, is it amazing? Is it gonna blow your socks off? No, it's not. But is it an entertaining? I watched it on a Sunday morning. It's an entertaining movie for a Sunday. You see what I'm saying? Like, it is sugar. It is pure sugar for the brain. Don't get me wrong. But the acting, the voice work, the CGI, the look of the characters being a mix between the Gen 1 and the Michael Bay Transformers, like the location in Peru, like everything about it, and the soundtrack. And it's probably got the greatest use to Mama Said Knock You Out I've seen in a movie in a long time. Like it really does.
right,
It
right.
really does. Like for me, it was fantastic. I mean, I gave it a 3.5 because yeah, the beginning of it's a little slow and it's a little bit kind of cheesy at times, and some of the humor doesn't always land. Although I appreciated it. Um, what got me was some of the very adult jokes that snuck their way in from Mirage because it's voiced by Pete Davidson. Like he goes like the whole point with him and the brother talking and he's like, how do you know my brother? He goes, well, I don't really know him, but he was inside me. Like mind blown that that got snuck into the movie that nobody seemed to
Right.
catch. Like I was like,
Right. Pete Davidson, he did a great job as Mirage, and that's a
he
you
did.
did a great
He
point of
did.
highlighting it. And I think we were talking about it before, where at first I felt some type of way about the in Transformers Iron Man suit, but then once I found, I was like, yeah, that was like
Yeah,
that. They
that was a
actually had the
thing.
toys. That was part of the story. That was canon. And then at the very end, which I kind of don't want to spoil that part
No, I
over
don't want to
over
spoil the very
right, but that
because
was a
I want
cool
that.
little
I want that
nostalgic
movie.
moment
I
too.
want that
Right,
movie.
right. So yeah, I wouldn't definitely say like it's the greatest thing of all time. It's that sugar reference we keep getting back to, but it definitely was better than I expected. That's
Me too.
another one to go into. I think you go in with low expectations to reasonable expectations, you can have a really really good time with it. But it just seems like these movies are really long too. But anyway, I mean that's pretty much. I know we got that. What you had? Was there anything else you wanted to get in Transformers? Because I know it was another suggestion that you had that we wanted to get into before we wrap the whole Oppenheimer greatness up.
Yeah, so Transformers, just real quick, I put it. I gave it 3.5 stars on that movie rating app. Lord, y'all can follow me on there if y'all want to. I don't remember the name of the app, but
Well, how they gonna follow
Letterbox.
if they? Okay, all right. So follow.
Letterboxed.
What's your so letterbox, and they're gonna look
Uh,
you up how on letterbox?
Zero Bird. Zero. Spelt out bird. Z E R O
Zero
B
bird.
I R D. Yeah, Zero Bird.
Cool.
So Transformers, I gave it a 3.5, and I said Rise of the Beast was surprisingly fun and excites me for a new generation of Transformers movies that is more faithful to the '80s cartoon I remember. That's
No, right.
perfect
Okay. Exactly.
summarization for me. Is
Right.
100%. Like this is it. So the last movie I want to talk about, because Todd, I sense over time, because we've been friends for a long time, that you've started to drift more into horror movies. So I've been giving you some recommendations over time for horror movies. Now, I know you were always into the '80s horror movies, but like modern horror movies, I've been giving you some recommendations, and I don't think I've drifted you wrong, um, for the most
Not
part.
once. Not once yet.
So for me, the movie is called Pearl, and it's from last year, and it stars who I think is probably the greatest living actress of her generation, Mia Goth. I really think Mia Goth is an incredible actress. She's known in the horror community because there was these series of movies that Ty West is making. It's a trilogy that all follows. It all stars Mia Goth. The first one was the movie X. The prequel to the movie X is called Pearl, and there's going to be a sequel to the movie X called Maxine. Pearl is a masterpiece in horror filmmaking. It is like, what if you took Wizard of Oz, but it all takes place in somebody's head, and she just turns out to be a complete sociopath and psychotic, and just absolutely kills everybody around her? Like that's what Pearl is, and it's beautiful. Like it's got that Wizard of Oz. Like there's musical sequences and bright lighting. It's the stuff that you don't expect from a horror movie, and that's what I loved about it. Is for the most part, it's not somebody stalking somebody around in the dark. A lot of the stuff occurs in very bright lighting, and there's musical sequences, and you really spend the entire movie with the killer, which is Pearl, and you get to know her and you get to kind of feel sorry for her. And then she goes off the deep end with the final shot of the movie being one of the best like summaries I could say for the entire mind that is Pearl. High recommend. I'm not going to spoil any of it. I highly recommend. You don't have to see X. X was the first movie. You don't have to see X to understand Pearl. You, it makes it a better movie in my opinion. But what I would actually do is watch Pearl and then watch X, because X is Pearl when she's like 80. So it's a great, just watch it. Like trust me, Mia Goth is just killing it out there. She's killing it in these streets. She was also in Infinity Pool, which I also think is a modern classic, but that movie's not for
That
everybody.
sounds like a webcam stripper fucking horror story starring featuring Andrew Tate. Infinite Pool?
Infinity Pool. No, it's
Oh,
a
Infinity Pool, yeah.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
like an Infinity Pool, like all of them,
yeah.
show on Instagram, like in an Infinity Pool in a high rise skyscraper. Yeah.
Infinity
Okay. So
Pool's
Pearl.
Infinity Pool's got Skarsgård in it. One of them,
Okay.
and
Okay. Okay.
he basically plays it. It asks the question of, hey, well, it doesn't really ask the question. It just it's a thought process on the super wealthy being able to get away with whatever they want to, and especially in some of these third world countries is really what it is. It's hey, they're gonna go
Starring Oppenheimer, the third
start.
world country. But anyway,
It's a good movie too.
okay.
Infinity Pool, I
Okay.
be
All right.
cautious
So
about Infinity Pool. That's not a recommendation for me. I personally loved it, but it's a very it is a hard movie to digest, and it is a very artistically driven, and it's directed by Brandon Cronenberg, who's the son of David Cronenberg, who's one of my favorite filmmakers of all time. That's not a recommendation, but if you're curious, if you want to know a little bit more, and this goes out to the audience, if you want to know a little bit more about how my brain works, watch Infinity Pool and then realize that I think it is a modern classic. So it's a little bit more about how my brain processes stuff. But that's all we got this week. Todd, was there anything you wanted to ask about Pearl or add to the
Nah, man,
Transformers
I'm gonna
convo?
check it out. I'm gonna check it out, and we can check it out. And it's just good. I was just glad to hear your perspective on Oppenheimer. As usual, I just wanted to shout out anybody checking this out, either through the podcast or on the YouTube. Adam, of course, triple STT triple OG. You know what I'm saying? Much appreciated, coming through, and much love to the tribe. Much love to you. Look forward to talking about some other stuff soon. Some gaming. I might put out some World Tour
Yeah.
gameplay on here. But nah,
I
that's
might
pretty
be on
much
here
it,
a
man.
little later with some what's it called? Remnant 2.
Man,
Remnant
come
2.
on, man. And hey, man, please, man, Bob, send some
Yes.
little old booty Bob on me. Yo, Bob, you know what I'm saying? Yeah, Adam, of course. STT triple OG. Aaron, you already know what time it is. Adam, excuse me. My fault. I'm thinking he'll be around. Aaron will be around too. But
Yeah, it will.
yeah, man,
All right.
that's all
Well,
I got.
that's it. And as we always do before we sign off, stay humble.
Yeah, yeah.